Did anybody here grow up like a true church kid? Raise your hands. Sunday mornings, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, yes? Anybody do handbells at church? I can't get over the handbells. I know I talk about this a lot. You wore white gloves a lot when you did the handbells. That was weird, right? Why did we learn those? I always got stuck with the big ones on the end. We didn't get to do a lot, but it felt really important. This isn't about handbells. So I was a church kid like many of you, and after high school, I studied theology. No applause. Hold for applause was in my notes. No applause. And then I did grad school to study more theology. And after all of that study and all of that church that I did, all those Sunday mornings and Sunday nights and Wednesday nights, can I tell you something? I still love Sundays. Today was not a particularly easy morning to get ready to host. And then church started, and I thought, I do love Sundays. I love being here with you. And it's not just the nostalgia, though there is a little bit of that for me. I love what we do together here on Sundays. There's sort of a soundtrack to being here. There's a little bit of a buzz of conversations before church gets started. Some small talk, some introductions that I sometimes like to listen in on to just see how they go, because sometimes they are wonderful and sometimes they are wonderfully awkward. Lately I've been sort of tuning into the soundtrack of communion. You guys do this, you walk up together. Have you heard everyone's feet shuffling? No one really walks, we all just shuffle up. And there's a little bit of a sound to it on the slate floor. The floors are a little sticky today from an event, so there will be a special sound as you walk forward. But there's a little bit of a soundtrack to it. It's like a march towards love and grace and acceptance. It's small, but it's not nothing. I love what we do here. I love our prayers. The prayers we pray out loud together every week. I didn't grow up in a tradition that used like repeated liturgy. When we got together on Sunday, it was supposed to be extemporaneous. It was supposed to be not thought out or planned. That was somehow better than the people who used pre-written prayers. But I love the prayers we get to say together. I've said and now heard Bree say hundreds of times, created, loved, rescued, forgiven, and this is who you are. I'm not over it yet. I love Sundays because we remind each other who we are. And every single week as a part of our communion liturgy, we say this to you. God has never needed to change God's mind about you. And I won't teach long today because I want to have time for everything else we have planned. But this is where our conversation is landing. God has never needed to change God's mind about you. It's not a throwaway line. It's not a side point. This is the whole game. God has only ever had one posture towards you, one idea about you, one singular song sung over you. Beloved, beloved, beloved. God didn't need a blood sacrifice from someone else to decide how to feel about you, and God doesn't need a perfect theology from you to love you. God has never needed to change God's mind about you. And today, our lectionary passage is a familiar story. There's a character that has all of these competing narratives being formed about him, all these different ideas forming an identity, how they view themselves, how other people are viewing them, how they assume God views them. And then Jesus comes walking by and says, this is who you are. In Luke 19, we get the story of Zacchaeus, and this is what it says. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner? But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. Have you heard this story before? Zacchaeus was a wee little man. You guys are doing good at the call and response today. Wee little man. Don't love that. This is a story about competing narratives about this man named Zacchaeus. A wee little man was he. There's a part given to us by the narrator, by the author here about Zacchaeus. We get some information. There's also sort of a narrative that gets spoken in about Zacchaeus from the crowd. And then juxtaposed against all of that is what Jesus says about Zacchaeus. So the narrator, the author, starts by saying this: Zacchaeus was a tax collector and he's wealthy. Those details are important. They get included on purpose because it probably means that Zacchaeus is corrupt. He's stealing money. Right? The and he was wealthy part is important. You can imagine that being sort of parenthetical, like with a little side eye. He's chief tax collector, and he's wealthy. He's a government official who has accumulated a lot of wealth by taxing his own people and taxing a little extra off the top, probably. That's what we sort of can get from the passage. It's a narrative. The narrative also includes, of course, that Zacchaeus is a short man, and he's probably pretty short because it gets included. It's noticeable. And when Jesus invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house, and he does just invite himself over, he says, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. Real dad energy. And then he invites himself over, and the crowd says this: he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. That's the narrative they give about Zacchaeus. So first we have that he's corrupt, that he's a cheat, and now we have that he's a sinner. And then Zacchaeus does this wild thing. Jesus hasn't said anything to him, made no accusations against him. All we've known so far is that the crowd says, we think this man is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stands up and says, just hypothetically, if I have cheated anyone, I'll pay back extra. Just hypothetically, here I am today, I'll do the right thing. You kind of feel the ridiculousness of it, right? Jesus just says, let's eat together. And he says, by the way, quick announcement. Jesus didn't ask for this. It sort of reminds me of the story just 4 chapters earlier in the Gospel of Luke, when a son returns home to his father, and the father's waiting, has run out to him on the road to embrace him and celebrate him. And before the father can hug the son gives a big speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. And the father didn't ask for an apology. He just wanted a hug. And here in this story, no one's asking for a big speech. But the narrator calls him a cheat, and the crowd calls him a sinner. Zacchaeus assumes that Jesus needs something from him in order to be accepted. A big public confession, a religious spectacle. And then Jesus says this: today salvation has come to this house because this man too is a son. Salvation doesn't come because Zacchaeus made a big confession. And it doesn't come because of a religious spectacle. Doesn't come because of lofty religious promises. They're kind of unrealistic religious promises. Have any of you ever made those before? Salvation comes because Zacchaeus is a son. He's already part of the family. It's not because of any big confession. It's not because of a promise to do better. It's because Zacchaeus is a part of the family. He already belongs. And all Jesus is doing here is reminding Zacchaeus of who he already is. No matter the narratives that are being formed about him, no matter the whispers, no matter the assumptions that Zacchaeus holds of himself, Jesus comes walking by and says, I will tell you who you are. You're a son. You belong. This is why you get to have safety. God came walking down the road in Jericho, and God already knew what to think of Zacchaeus. Before Zacchaeus made a public confession, before anyone called Zacchaeus a name, that God who came marching down the road already knew what God thought about Zacchaeus. A son, safe, loved. Jesus did let Zacchaeus spin out a little bit, which I think I appreciate. Jesus could have led with salvation has come to you because you're a son, but he kind of let Zacchaeus do his thing. And I think maybe some of us might be right in the middle of making big promises to God. We feel a little lost. We feel a little insecure. We feel a little unsure of where we stand. And we're starting to make some big promises. And God, I think today is maybe going to let it all die down a little bit. Let the whispers, the assumptions, let it run its course. And then maybe today, if you could be quiet, you could hear the whisper of love speak into your life. Beloved, beloved, beloved. I know some of you have heard this message before. You've at least heard us say it to you over and over again, that God has never needed to change God's mind about you, but I'm not sure that we're all free yet. Maybe you've come to the conclusion that you weren't born bad, which I appreciate. That you didn't start with a debt. And that is a good start. But I'm afraid that a lot of us still believe that God is keeping score in some way. That we started okay. Some of us were taught that we were bad from the beginning, and we've undone some of that theology. We say, maybe I'm not bad from the beginning. Maybe I'm good from the start. But then I made some mistakes. And I have some defensiveness. And I have some trauma, and I live and act out of that sometimes, and I'm doing some things I shouldn't do. And I think God is upset with me about that. There is no time limit or behavioral benchmark that can add or subtract from the unwavering love and acceptance of God. You and your beliefs, you and your behavior, you and your defensiveness and your pain and your trauma, you are not capable of moving the unmovable love of God. There is no action. There is no behavior. There is no time. There is no past. There is no present. There is no future that can move an unmovable God. And God is with you. Let me say this, you are within God. We live and move and have our being in the presence of God, and you are not able to change it. And now I know, and this is true for Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus is doing stuff that isn't good. It's bad. He's cheating people. He gives a little, if I have ever cheated anyone, but he's clearly doing stuff he shouldn't do. This is bad. This is harmful behavior. Jesus isn't saying that the behavior is good. And God doesn't have to turn a blind eye to our bad choices. We make bad choices. We do harmful things. Those aren't good. God isn't turning a blind eye or pretending that they're good. God isn't calling all of your behavior good. God is calling you good. This is the good news of the gospel, that God does in fact see you. That God does, in fact, know your pain. That God does, in fact, see all of your trauma and your defensiveness and all of the ways that you act out of those things and cause harm in the world. God sees all of it. And God doesn't turn a blind eye to it or pretend it's not there or pretend that it's good in some way. God sees it all. And God doesn't call all of your behavior good, but God still calls you good because God loved you and God made you, and God is with you, and there is not a behavior, there is not a past, there is not a present or a future that can move God's unmovable love for you. And the point of this story is that those harmful and destructive behaviors, those things don't change out of shame and guilt. Zacchaeus isn't going to change when the crowd calls him a sinner. They've called him a sinner before. It's not the first time they've whispered that about him. They've called him a sinner before. The narrative was already there. Zacchaeus gets transformation because of safety and belonging and love. And so for you, if there are places in your life that do need to transform, no one's saying that all of your behavior is good. If there are places in your life that do need to transform, that transformation will start from safety and belonging and love. Never shame. The whispers are already there, but maybe you could just let those die down and hear about the unchangeable, unmovable love of God for you today. God has never needed to change God's mind about you. God has no interest in punishing you. There is no retribution in God. God is too busy delighting in you to consider punishing you. God has never needed to change God's mind about you. You know, there's this interesting dynamic in the gospel inside of these stories in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. A lot of the characters, the people we hear about in the gospels, they aren't named. We don't know their name. They're called the blind man, or the bleeding woman, or the leper, or the son, or the brother, or the rich young ruler, which, by the way, is the best name someone gets. Way better than wee little man. But in this story, there's all these descriptors that other people use about Zacchaeus, like he's short, or he's a tax collector, or he's wealthy, or he's a sinner. But Jesus doesn't use any of those. When Jesus walks by, Jesus calls him by name. Zacchaeus has a reputation. Jesus doesn't use any of those descriptors. In fact, he never brings them up at all in the story. You know, Zacchaeus runs up ahead in this story. And I know that it says he was short, but running up ahead of the crowd would have been enough to see Jesus. You know, he could have just been at the front of he was at the front of the crowd. That would have been enough. He didn't just climb up in the tree so he could see. He climbed up in the tree so he could hide. But Jesus calls him by name. God came walking down the road in Jericho and saw a man who was hiding. And he called him by name, Zacchaeus. Can you feel it? You have a name. You have a family. You can be whole. Immediately get down from that tree. You have a name. You have a family. You can be whole. You don't have to hide. You don't have to defend. You don't even have to make your lofty religious promises. You have a name. You have a family. You can be whole. I wonder today if we would all stop hiding so much. If we knew that when we were finally found, we wouldn't be shamed at all. That there would be no guilt. That there would only be the reminder that we have been given a name. That love has been spoken over us, that we have a family, and that we can be whole. I wonder today if we could hear the voice of love calling our name. I wonder if we could quiet all the voices of shame. Maybe they're coming from within. Maybe you imagine that if someone called your name out today, there would be some imaginary crowd that whispered things about you. I wonder if all of that could get turned down in your heart today, so that you could listen to the voice of love. You have a name. You have a family. You can be whole. Listen. 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 Gather, this is my prayer for us today. May you come down from whatever tree you have found to protect yourself. You already belong. You're already loved. Listen, listen, listen. Amen.